Well, hi, everybody. My name is Tony DeRose. I'm a senior scientist at Pixar. I've been here about 20 years. Our group is responsible for developing technology for future films. But I'm also a dad and a former educator. So I've become really interested in what Pixar can do to help bring some relevance and inspiration to education. So I've been involved in a couple of educational initiatives over the last couple of years. One of the first ones was a collaboration with the Museum of Science in Boston. It resulted in a 13,000 square foot science exhibition that opened in Boston last summer, and it's on tour currently in Southern California, and it'll probably be touring for about 10 years. And the goal of that exhibition is to really kind of pull back the covers and show the degree to which math and science is used in the production of our films. That collaboration led to a second collaboration called Pixar in a Box, which I'd like to tell you a little bit about today. That's a collaboration between Pixar and Khan Academy, and it's really designed to help answer the question that many parents and teachers hear, which is, when am I ever going to need to use this stuff? Why do I need to know this stuff? And Pixar in a Box is really designed to help answer that question. For those of you that aren't familiar with Khan Academy, it's perhaps the most influential online educational platform. They have, I don't know, 20 million registered users and billions of answered questions. We partnered with them starting about 2 years ago and launched the first Pixar in a Box content last summer. So let me share my screen and let's go over and see what Pixar in a Box is all about. So if you go to a browser and type in pixarinabox.org, it'll take you to the landing page, which is here. And the basic organizing principle behind Pixar in a Box is to highlight creative challenges that we face at the studio, and then show how concepts that are being taught in classrooms are used to address those creative challenges. So let's scroll down here to the main content. So for instance, in say the environment modeling lesson, students will learn how the grass in Brave was created. And that was an application of parabolic arcs, it turns out. In the character modeling lesson, you learn some of the math behind how we create the shapes of our characters. Pixar in a Box is a 3-year project. Year 1 focused mostly on math topics. Year 2 focused mostly on science, and including computer science. And year 3, which we're just now embarking on, is going to focus on story. So the first story material will appear in January, and then subsequent topics in the story area will appear about every 6 weeks after that. Each of the, let's see, let me pop over here. Each of the topics in Pixar in a Box is hosted by one or more Pixar employees. So for instance, Fran Kalal, shown here, hosts the combinatorics topic, which explains how to create large crowds of robots. Alonso Martinez, down here, hosts the character modeling lesson, and Susan Fong hosts the rendering lesson. So we really wanted to pick as diverse collection of Pixar employees as we could to be the on-screen talent, in the hopes that students for a wide variety of backgrounds could, imagine themselves in these kinds of, creative and challenging careers. So I thought what we're going to do today is kind of walk you through the animation topic. So let's pop back over to the website and click into animation. This material is all free to anybody in the world, just like all the material on Khan Academy. And also, like all the content on Khan Academy, it was really optimized for use by individual learners. Although we're starting to talk to teachers to see what we can do to help bring more of this material into classrooms. So the architecture of each topic is broken into two parts, two lessons. The first lesson shown here gradually builds up a deeper understanding of what the creative challenge is, in this case animation, or how to bring characters to life. And then the second topic dives more deeply into the academic concepts. In this case, the main academic concepts are ideas of linear and cubic interpolation. So each of the topics also begins with an introductory video that kind of tees up what the creative challenge is, and then at least indicates what some of the underlying academic concepts are. The material is mostly intended for middle and high school students, but these lesson ones are pretty broadly accessible. So we've gotten feedback that they've been appropriate, even starting in second grade. And they're interesting to, lots of people up through adults. So let's jump in here to the Math Meets Artistry introductory topic. And let's just let this video play.
Hi, I'm Rob Jensen, and I'm an animator. Before we talk about computer animation and algorithms and all that, let's just talk about what animation is at its core. All animation is based on the same idea, making changes to a series of images and playing those images back in sequence. Now, in hand-drawn animation, we do this by drawing. Animators draw key poses and then draw a series of pictures we call in-betweens that connect the motion from one pose to another. It's a lot of drawing. In computer animation, we animate by moving virtual digital models. We call this posing. The poses we create are translated into coordinates that are recorded on a spreadsheet. The computer fills in the in-between images. These in-betweens are the result of a computer interpreting what motion would move an image from this pose to that pose. Of course, the computer can't act, so it gives us this. We refine the in-betweens to turn this robotic motion into a polished performance like this. And there are many different ways of filling in the in-betweens, but each can be described using a mathematical function called a spline. And this is where the math meets the artistry. The simplest way to see this spline idea is through a bouncing ball. I'm going to make it bounce from here to here with 4 main poses that I define by setting keyframes. The computer draws all the other frames by evaluating the spline. By default, the computer makes a linear interpolation of the motion, and we get something that moves at a constant speed. Now, from physics, we know that the ball should accelerate on the way down and decelerate on the way up. I can adjust the shape of the spline to change the timing. Now we got something that looks more realistic, but it's still pretty generic. As an animator, it's my job to bring to life a specific character, so I need to ask myself some questions. Is the ball heavy and depressed like this, or maybe it's happy, maybe it's a balloon? Once I answer these questions, I can choose what kind of spline I think will have that effect in the motion. Now, this gets even more exciting when you're looking at a character and their physics, because how a character moves says a lot about who they are. For example, Mr. Incredible in this scene, the animation needs to show him lifting up a train car. Now, in animation, you can make that seem really quick and easy, but the director didn't want that. He wanted the audience to know that Mr. Incredible could do amazing things, but that it took a lot of effort to do them. So, the way we define the speed of the in-betweens will make the difference between the train looking light or the train looking heavy. So, let's be clear, the computer helps us a lot, but ultimately this job is really about acting. But instead of being in front of the camera, you're taking the performance and breaking it down into tiny little 24th of a second increments and expressing those in an abstract mathematical function. Pretty cool, right?
Okay, so the hope is that these intro videos really hook kids into wanting to go a little deeper. And then the rest of the topic really deepens the concepts and also gets them using some interactive programs that we've designed to accompany Pixar in a Box. So to tee up that first interactive program, let me play the first kind of tutorial video that explains some of the tools actually used by animators.
So we're going to delve deeper into the mathematics of splines in a minute, but first I want to show you around the animation department at Pixar. Even though we work on movies all day, in an animated movie there's no real set, so our job is basically sitting in front of a computer. But that doesn't mean it has to be boring. Since our job demands a lot of creativity, we try to make Pixar feel like a place where creativity thrives. The animation department is divided into different pods, basically groups of offices. Each pod has evolved a different style. This one's the jungle pod, decorated with vines, plants, a castle, and even an office made to feel like the interior of a crash-landed plane. This one here is kind of a central gathering place for animators, complete with a performance stage for live music. I spend some of my free time as a DJ, so I help decorate my pod as the Vinyl Lounge, complete with turntables. Okay, I'm going to start by showing you some techniques used in hand-drawn animation, and then we'll see how those translate into the computer. Let's first animate a ball using a technique called straight-ahead animation. I'm going to start with frame 1. Now we'll put down another sheet of paper. These pegs help us keep it lined up. And I'll draw frame 2 here. Now frame 3 and frame 4. As you can see, I'm drawing one frame after another in order. When I'm done, I'll scan all these pictures into the computer so we can play it back. Straight-ahead animation works the same way in the computer. You can give it a try in the next interactive demo. Start by dragging the ball where you want it to be at the beginning of your animation. Then step to the next frame and drag the ball where you want it. Just move it a little bit each frame. Keep going like this, one frame at a time. When you're done, press play to see your animation. Now let's see what you can come up with.
Okay, good. So now if we go to the next stop in the lesson, we're taken to that little applet that we saw Rob demo. So this is the idea of straight ahead animation. And these applets are really patterned after software tools that our artists use here at Pixar. So let me see what I can do. Let's see. This is kind of an open-ended exercise. Let's see. So I'm going to leave the ball at the very top at frame 1. I'm going to move to frame 2, pull it down a little bit. Move to frame 3, pull it down a little bit more. Frame 4. Get it all the way to the bottom at frame 6, say. So you can see that straight ahead animation really requires you to manually specify the position of the ball at every moment in time. So let's see how my animation looks. Okay, that's not too bad. And this is, as I mentioned, kind of an open-ended exercise. There's really no right or wrong answer. Some of the exercises are like that. Some of the exercises are really more intended as mastery, be able to demonstrate mastery. So they're so you're asked questions and then kind of graded so that if a teacher is using this in a classroom, they can keep track of which students are having difficulty. The next stop in the lesson is to go beyond straight ahead animation and introduce something called pose-to-pose interpolation. So let's take a quick listen at that video.
Okay, straight ahead animation works, but a lot of times it's hard to figure out where you're going. A lot of times it's helpful to start by working out what we call the key poses first. For a bouncing ball, that's going to be where the ball is at its highest point and where it hits the ground. I'll start by drawing frame 1 up high. Now let's draw frame 9 on the ground. Now I can draw the in-betweens using these key poses as a guide. I'll draw frame 5 in the middle. We call this a breakdown. Now I can keep adding more frames, subdividing the space. Sometimes it helps to make a little chart to keep track of all the numbers. Great, now let's shoot our drawings and play them back. In fact, we can cheat and make it bounce back by reusing the same drawings on the way back up. The ball's moving, but it's not very realistic. Sometimes, before you get started, it helps to shoot video reference, so you have some idea what you're doing. Remember, the ball needs to speed up as it falls to the ground. Our frame 5 is halfway through the animation in time, but the ball shouldn't be halfway to the ground at that point. Instead, I'm going to draw a new frame 5 that's biased towards the first pose. Maybe I'll draw it a third of the way down. Animators have developed a visual language using these timing charts to show how to space the drawings in between key poses. So frame 5, remember, is a third of the way between 1 and 9. I'll draw frame 3 a third of the way between 1 and 5, and so on. These charts help us keep track of the in-between drawings, so we end up at the proper timing. When we play this back, the ball accelerates towards the ground. Now let's see how we use the same technique of pose-to-pose animation on the computer. We'll start by positioning the ball up in the air on frame 1, just like before. And then we'll skip ahead to frame 9 and put the ball on the ground. Down below the picture, the computer shows us this graph. It's kind of like the 2D timing chart, and it shows us how the computer is going to calculate the in-between frames. The horizontal axis is time, and the vertical axis is how high up the ball is. Check this out. If we project the intersection of each frame onto the vertical axis, we end up with exactly the same timing chart that the 2D animators use. You can see that by default, the computer connects our poses with a straight line in the graph. This is called linear interpolation. It results in even spacing of the poses. When we play it back, the ball will move at a constant rate. Now you give it a try. See if you can animate a convincing bouncing ball using linear interpolation. And here's a hint, you can add extra keyframes in between to get the spacing that you want.
Okay, and then the next interactive is that same piece of software that you saw Rob using. The concept, again, here is linear interpolation. So now instead of having to manually specify where the ball should be at every frame, we can just go to a few keyframes and explain and define where the ball is. So I've defined where it is at frame 1 and frame 12, and then the computer is going to go ahead and calculate the intermediate values for me. So at frame 5, it's going to be at height 95. At frame 6, it's going to be at height 82, and so on. So that gives us a nice linear curve. So if you run into students who are really wondering, why do I need to know about linear functions? Well, this is a nice application. Now to get the motion that's going to occur here, as Rob said, is just moving at a constant velocity, when we really know it should accelerate on the way down and decelerate on the way up. So I can go ahead and add a few intermediate keyframes to get more of that acceleration and deceleration motion. Let's see what that looks like. Well, that's getting there. But what you'll quickly discover is that to get a really nice smooth acceleration and deceleration, you end up having to put key poses at just about every frame. So in the next video, Rob describes how to replace those linear line segments, that linear interpolation, with something called Bezier curves. And Bezier curves will give you nice curved behavior for the in-between frames. So now with just very little work, I can create a ball that pretty convincingly accelerates on the way down, decelerates on the way up, and I can modify the shapes of these curves by pulling around the endpoints like this, but I also get control of what's happening on the interior of each segment, each curve segment, using these purple handles here. So that lets me get some pretty convincing motion. And then jumping ahead to lesson 2, the topic in lesson 2 is to really understand the algebra and the geometry behind these Bezier curves. So by the end of lesson 2, students come away with enough knowledge to know basically how to program Bezier curves and build their own little animation system if they like. Okay, so one other kind of content that we have as part of Pixar in a Box are some videos we call getting to know videos. And these are a chance for the on-screen Pixar employees to really tell a little bit about their personal story, how they got to Pixar, what interested them. So let's take a look at the Getting to Know Fran. Get rid of that. Let's take a look at the Getting to Know Fran video.
Come on! Okay. So one of the mentors that was really important to me in deciding that I wanted to go into computer graphics was Maria Palazzi. She was the director of the Advanced Computing Center for the Arts and Design at Ohio State University, and she met with me as a high schooler, and I talked to her about my interests, and she said there's a field where you can use your love for art and design and your love for science and coding, and that field is computer graphics. And she showed me her center and walked me around, and I could see all the cool things that the graduate students there were doing, and I thought, this is my place. So this is some of my student work that you're looking at. One of my favorite things to do with my student work was to understand how signals could overlap each other to create different looks in a shader network. And so this is a lot of me playing with shader networks to see, gosh, can I change a high frequency fractal, and can that alternate between a saturated and a desaturated version of this texture? And I thought that that was so cool that you could use these relatively simple signals to combine complex texture maps and get these interesting looks in the end. What I loved about doing this work is that every time I would write a piece of code or make a connection, I could see a visual result right away from what I was doing. And that's how I loved learning how to code. To have this visual result from the work that I was doing was so rewarding. And for me, I was a really active learner, and so it was really helpful to see a result as soon as I made something. Another reason I went into computer graphics instead of live action film is what was happening at the time. I was so inspired by the short bunny. I thought it was one of the most beautiful things I'd ever seen. I've always been so moved by bringing animals and characters to life. And that's something that you can do with puppetry quite well. But that's something that computer graphics does exceptionally well. It is just the right format for those things. And Ratatouille had just come out, and I found out that Pixar was going to come visit our campus, and I could not wait to talk to the people who made the delicious looking food. But we had a really good conversation, and they liked my work. And so they asked if I would come to Pixar and do some shading. So I did. And my boss was the lady who made the beautiful food in Ratatouille, Athena Xenakis. It was amazing when I showed up and got that assignment on the first day. I just could not believe my luck. I was so excited. And on my resume, there was a line that said hobbies. And in the line that said hobbies, it said knitting, playing piano, and sewing. And one of the supervising technical directors looked at that line and said, wait, you can understand how to use computer programs and you can sew. You know there's jobs for people that do that at Pixar? And I said, no. And he said, do you want to come and try that? And I said, yeah. So they found a spot for me on Wall-E. We had just gone through getting some notes back from an audience preview, and the characters weren't a size that made the audience happy. So we resized some of the characters, and they needed their outfits refitted, which is perfect intern work. And then they gave me Ellie, and they asked me to dress and tailor Ellie, and I just could not believe my luck. She is the most amazing and wonderful character. She's outgoing and she's fun and she's smart. Ellie went well. They liked the way she looked, and I was happy with it too. So they asked me to work on Merida, which was really awesome. And that went well. So then they asked me to work on Disgust and Riley and all Riley's mom's clothes, which was a lot of fun. And now I'm working on something I totally can't talk about on camera. If this is a field that's interesting to you, or if there's any field that's interesting to you, and you look around and you see not a lot of people in that field look like me, it's okay. You're going to find your people. Just go into it, get some great mentors, make some great friends, and just believe if you want to be there bad enough, it's your place. Kitty! I'm sorry, there's a cat. There's a cat. Oh God, there's a cat.
Great. So let's take a few questions. Jennifer asks, what age range is it geared for? Well, the lesson 1 in each of the topics is pretty broadly accessible. Generally, we target it at middle school and up, but lesson 1 is generally pretty accessible. Lesson 2 often gets into high school range material. There's a lesson guide at the top of the pixarinabox.org page that highlights which lessons are appropriate for which age groups. So I encourage you to check that out. Let's see, another question here. Richard asks, is the Pixar exhibition appropriate for high school career and technical education students? Absolutely right. We really highlight the careers that are possible in the medium of computer animation, particularly the STEM careers, because that's not so obvious to people that we rely on math and science as heavily as we do. It's pretty obvious that we need writers and storytellers and filmmakers. Let's see, any other questions here? Be sure to ask the questions online. Let's see. Mohammed asks, does anybody know the name of this software? For those of you that may have joined late, it's called Pixar in a Box, and it's available free online. If you type pixarinabox.org into your browser, it'll take you right to the landing page. Let's see, Tyler asks, is this appropriate for the Hour of Code next week? Unfortunately, I'm not that familiar with the Hour of Code, although we do have 2 topics, one that's currently out called Rigging that focuses on computer science, and one that's coming out next week on how to simulate things like Merida's hair. And that's also a computer science and coding oriented topic. So I encourage you to check those out. You can sign up for the Khan Academy mailing list by going to khanacademy.org and signing up, and you'll get a notice when that's released. Okay. Let's see. Michael asks, for teachers, how do you get your student results? Well, Khan Academy has a teacher portal, so all those students in a teacher's classroom can be presented through that portal, and the teacher gets a dashboard so they can track the progress of each of their students. It's a great question. Maybe time for one more, if there is one. Let's see. We're just about out of time. Oh, one thing I could mention is that topics get more difficult as you go. So it's okay if students go as far as they can and then maybe put it down, go on to another topic, maybe come back and pick it up the next year. I'm going to sign off now. Thank you very much, everyone. Hope you enjoyed the little presentation.